Hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Torah of Abortion Justice. I am Rabbi Becky Silverstein. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm joining today from unceded Massachusetts land, also known as Boston. And I'm a proud member of the Rabbis for Repro Advisory Board, as well as one of the co-directors of the Trans Halacha Project. And though our gathering today is motivated by the injustice and the harm in the world, particularly as it pertains to reproductive justice, it still feels like a blessing to be gathered together to learn Torah, one of my favorite things to do in the whole world. And one of my favorite definitions of Torah is that Torah is an experience or a teaching that gets inside of us and impacts us deeply. And so my hope for our time together for the next hour is that what we learn and what we hear and experience gets inside of us and grounds us and informs how we move forward through the next bit of time, however we might define that. And since what we are going to be doing is most certainly Torah, I thought we might start with the blessing for Torah study. And I'm going to use the language from the Non-Binary Hebrew Project, which is part of my practice this summer to get this pronunciation to be smooth in my mouth. Bruche ateh chavaya shechinu ruach haolam asher kidashtanu b'mitzvoteha v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, existence and presence that animates our world, the one who makes us holy through your commandments and commands us to engage deeply in words of Torah. Amen to all of your brachot, also maybe to mine. And without any further introduction, let's jump in. So I'm excited to pass the mic to my friend and teacher, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, NCJW's scholar in residence.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you to my friend and teacher, Rabbi Becky Silverstein. You should really learn Torah with him. He's incredible. Welcome. This is a powerful and difficult and liminal time as the sands are shifting beneath our feet. And it's time to not only learn what Judaism has said about abortion, but to begin to make the Jewish case for abortion justice and to use our voices as Jews and as people who care about justice and the safety of everyone in a new way. So without further ado, we are going to begin at the beginning. There's a slide, boom. For many of us showing up today, abortion justice is already a matter of significant concern. And I would love to know in the chat why you think abortion bans might be a matter of specifically Jewish concern. And my suspicion is that over the next hour, we're going to see many of those reasons animated in some of our texts and ideas. Respect for dignity, pikuach nefesh, saving lives, justice, religious freedom, saving life, mental health, separation of church and state. Right, everybody's made in God's image, saving life. Right, Torah is not in heaven. Right, that we are given the Torah to animate in the world because it's an issue of justice, holy bodily autonomy. Yes, abortion laws are based on Christian values. Yes. Okay. Should we just get into it? Jewish law says, right? Christian, oh gosh, medical and human rights, you've got it. Okay, let's get into it. Let us do this thing. Let us, as we say in certain parts of the Jewy world, look at these texts from the inside, right? Have some time to look at first some of the classical texts and then sort of expand our thinking in some other ways. And some of you may know these texts very well, and some of you may be looking at them closely for the first time. And this is a conversation that I hope is going to be expansive and provoking for everybody, right? I hope that those of you who feel like you've seen these texts already will find new things in them. Let us do this thing. Boom. Okay, so now we are going to do something. It's a little bit of an experiment. We're going to see how this goes. So this is a Jamboard. And we are going to read this text. And we have Sarah Herson and Eliana Pirati are going to read the texts that we're going to use on this Jamboard. And Jamboard only lets you have 50 people on at one time. So I'm going to put the link to the Jamboard. We're going to read the text. And then I'm going to ask a question. And then I'm going to put the link to the Jamboard into the chat. And not everybody's going to make it onto the Jamboard because there are more than 50 of you here, which is amazing and wonderful. And I am so thrilled that you are all here. And don't worry, we're gonna expand the text. We haven't gotten there. We will embiggen it, as they say, as I say. Did I just make up that word? Maybe, I don't know. But we are going to read the text. Then we are going to, then I'm going to ask a question. And then we're going to put the link to the Jamboard in the chat. And for people who can get in, they will get to play on the Jamboard and we'll see their responses right away. And everybody else will use the chat. And then when we get to the next text, the first 50 people who got in will politely leave so that other people can get in. And hopefully everybody will have a chance to use this tool. For those of you who do not know what a Jamboard is, we have this magical thing. I guess Lindsay is sharing her screen. Can you show? Yes. You click on the sticky note and then you have the sticky note and you can write it and click save. And then boom, it can go and you can drag it and you can change its size and change its color and all sorts of stuff. It is fun. Okay. That's how this works. So Lindsay, if you could be so kind as to expand the size of the image for a moment. Okay. Sarah, can you please read this text?
When men fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues, he shall be fined according as the woman's husband may exact from him the payment to be based on reckoning. But if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Okay,
so we're now going to stick the link for the Jamboard in the chat. Please only work with this first page. And my questions are, what do you notice about this text? And what do you wonder? And I know we're making it small, but I will stick the actual words in the chat so that you can access them. Actually, is this one of my great issues with Zoom is that it makes it very difficult to put in a GIF into the chat. Okay. Okay, so we say, does this mean the fetus is property? No death penalty for the death of the unborn, no death penalty for miscarriage. Primary text is more about property rights than the status of the fetus. The fetus doesn't have the same rights. I wonder what other damage means, right? Does the woman have any say? This incident is accidental. What happens if it's on purpose? Good question. On what basis does the husband determine what fine is to be paid? Good question. The word fetus isn't used. Only men can say what the penalty is. Yes. Judaism, right. Oh, you guys got this. I love this. What is reckoning? The husband is speaking on the pregnant person's behalf. The woman's life is more valuable than the fetus. What happens if she doesn't have a husband? Oh, good question. This is financial reparation. Personal injury is not a capital crime. What if she's not married? This is amazing. This is so good. True confession, I have never done this. I've never taught this way, and this is so good. How do rabbis assume that miscarriages happen? Only in fighting. Okay. Y'all have, as I assumed, y'all have pulled out a lot of the key issues, as well as raising so many questions to which I either do not have answers on the top of my head, or to which we do not have the answers because this is the information we have. Like, what do we do if she's not married? The text does not give us that information, right? This is all the information that we have. And to the best of my knowledge, though, I know there are a few rabbis and other smart, learned people on this call. If somebody knows of a text that addresses that question, if she doesn't happen to have a husband, I'm thrilled to see it. I have not seen that text. But here we have a situation. It is a patriarchal world, for sure. There are definitely commentary on these passages. I don't think I've seen rabbinic commentary addressing specifically the question of, Rabbi Drill is correct. It would be her father or her brother, right? Patriarchal world, it's whatever male is considered responsible for her. But definitely we know this is a patriarchal world. And so the man is treating this situation with financial compensation. But we see here that when there is a miscarriage that is caused, the loss of the fetus is not treated as manslaughter. But if she dies, and it's pretty clear in the text, and it's very clear by rabbinic interpretation, is unambiguous here, that the harm, the damage is, this word ason means that she dies, then it's treated as manslaughter, right? So the loss of a fetus is not manslaughter. So the fetus is treated as potential life rather than having the same status as those of us who are out here walking around, right? And there are absolutely major questions about her voice and her agency here, and those are real. And there's some amazing work on that, and there's amazing new thinking. Absolutely, completely blanking on the name of my incredible colleague. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I lost your name, but it's in the new CCAR social justice commentary has a great piece on this passage. And it's Rabbi Josh Fixler and his co-author, whose name I am absolutely blanking on. I'm so sorry. Have a fantastic piece on this. Emily Langowitz, thank you. So that's something to look for. So the main thing in terms of the building blocks of Jewish law is that we see that the status of the fetus is not the same as the status of a born person. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is this word ason, harm, damage. In modern Hebrew, it's like disaster. Oh, is it ason? It's a disaster. That got mistranslated when it got translated into the Greek. Instead of damage, it got translated to in the form. So if you read the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible called the Septuagint, you would get when men fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but it's not in the form, he should be fined. But if it is in the form, blah, blah, blah. And so Augustine took this to mean that we were talking about different stages of fetal development. And so Augustine's entire theory of ensoulment may have come from a mistranslation. So do with that what you will. Okay, everybody who's in the Jamboard, please leave, and let's go to the next slide.
Okay, I'll start reading. If a woman is having trouble giving birth, they cut up the child in her womb and brings it forth limb by limb, because their life comes before the life of the child. But if the greater part has come out, one may not touch it, for one may not set aside one person's life for that of another. And then the second part from Rashi is, the entire time that the fetus has not gone out into the air of the world, it is not considered a life.
Okay, what do you notice? What do you wonder? Okay, yes, very clear cut. Can't have a soul without breath. Are there people? Oh, yeah, new people, please join the Jamboard. The fetus becomes not a person until born. I knew you when you, Jeremiah says, I knew you were when you were formed in your mother's womb, but that actually in the context is actually God. Jeremiah's like, I don't know how to be a prophet. And God's like, oh, come on, dude, this has been, you and I have had this, you've been ready. It's a metaphor. The text assumes, two choices, either the mother's life or the fetus's life. What if it's not clear that you can clearly say one or the other? Greater part, not a person till mostly born. Her life is ranked higher than the fetus. Woman comes first, not a person till born. Right. So when there is a life-threatening case of labor, the Mishnah, which is the oral Torah, which is at least about 2,000 years old, possibly goes back to God giving the Torah on Sinai, depends on your theology, says very clearly and graphically that if there is a case where somebody's life needs to be saved, we are, even in labor, right? You want to talk about like quote unquote late stage abortions, like quote, even in labor, we prioritize her life unless the greater part has emerged. And Rashi, I didn't have space to quote all of it and I didn't want to get into it, but it says it's the head because it's the air of the world. It's that first breath, hearkening to Genesis 2:7, where God puts air into the nostrils of Adam's, the first human's nose. And that's like, we take our last breath at death and we take our first breath at birth is sort of the idea. And so at that point, if the head has emerged, then we have to just let nature take its course and we do not push off one life for another. But even in earlier labor, it's really clear whose life takes precedence. And that is not the case even in law, some of law today. So we get this. This is unambiguous, right? And there are all sorts of questions. What if it's breach? But the principle, right? We save her life first. And her or the pregnant person, trans men can get pregnant, some non-binary people can get pregnant, right? The pregnant person's life comes first. And from there, Maimonides says it is even a mitzvah. It is a commandment to preserve the life of the pregnant person, okay? So we are obligated, according to the system of Jewish law, to do this. So laws that violate our religious freedom, that say that we cannot do the thing we are obligated to do according to Jewish law, are an issue. Right now, we're starting to talk about free exercise clause of the First Amendment, right? Okay, this is unambiguous, and all of Jewish law is clear about it. Next slide. Okay. Next reader.
If she is found pregnant until the 40th day, it is mere fluid. What is the reason for Rabbi Yehudah HaNasi's position in the above conversation? He holds that a fetus is considered as its mother's thigh.
Okay, if we can get new people on the Jamboard or same people, get some people on the Jamboard. What do you see? What do you notice? These are two different conversations. And again, it's like too involved given the time we have to get into, Yehudah HaNasi was the redactor of the Mishnah, this ancient authoritative 2,000 or more year old text. Very authoritative guy. I didn't leave the context for why he was saying that, but we have two really important statements. What do you see? What do you notice? "40 days is barely 5 weeks." Actually not true, because Judaism counts from conception, and pregnancy, as we count it today, generally is from last menstrual period. And so that gets you actually 7 to 8 weeks of gestation, which is, for people who are curious, about when 2/3 of abortions happen. And certainly is, SB 8, the Texas law, is 6 weeks. Okay. Fetus is considered part of the mother. The idea of mere fluid is emotionally difficult, right? And this is really difficult for people who struggle with infertility, right? And I want to really name really clearly that for people who have challenges around infertility and pregnancy loss, and I am someone who has experienced pregnancy loss, so I want to just name that really clearly. Some of these texts can be challenging because they talk about like the technical status of a fetus. And this is not a statement about love and connection and relationship. It's about legal status. And those are slightly different. And again, we're talking about potential life versus actual life. And we're talking about, what somebody's relationship vis-a-vis certain, like statuses of ritual impurity, and are you allowed to, do certain ritual things that were, present back in the temple days and all of that. Like, it's very technical. And it is not a statement about whether or not your grief is legitimate. Okay. So just want to name that really clearly. So we've got this mere fluid, right? Not a separate life, complex organism. How do they come up with 40 days? I don't know where that came from, except that 40 is a special number in Judaism, right? We've got Moshe was up on Sinai for 40 days, Noach, 40 days and 40 nights with the flood, and all sorts of places where we see 40. Interestingly, in Islam, they also have a 40-day thing with the pregnancy, that the first 40 days is one very similar status. And then they go have a whole thing until 120 days. So in Islam, abortion is generally up until about 4 months. Right. And then the fetus is considered part of its mother. And so the fetus has no technical status for this first 40 days. And then it's part of it, the languages of its mother's thigh. We say part of the pregnant person, right? The human being decides whether or not they are going to parent or not. And, but it's a body part, which makes some sense given the relationship of dependency of a fetus to the pregnant person. And when we think about Roe and viability, fetal viability as the marker, there's some logic there. And so now when we talk about the establishment clause, right? And the idea that we are legislating based on the idea that life begins at conception, and Ohio wants to pass a bill saying that life begins at fertilization. which is a way to ban IUDs and birth control pills and other forms of birth control that basically make it impossible for a fertilized egg to implant in the uterus. That's a very specific Christian idea of when life begins. And you see here that in Judaism, life does not begin at conception. And so we are legislating religious ideas that are not ours, right? That is in a violation of the Establishment Clause. Just want you to see that very clearly from the inside. Okay, next slide. And now I actually want to pause before we get to Rav Emden. So from here, we've got the Mishnah and the Talmud, and everybody is pretty clear on that. And then we start to see a little fork. And there are texts that are like, abortion is only permitted to save the pregnant person's life because we have the Mishnah. We can't, disagree with that. But it's really, you shouldn't do it. It's no. We have that thread, and that is there, and that is real. And rather than me saying, let us look at every possible text by every person, I want to say that we can make a solid Jewish case for abortion justice using the other thread, which I believe is there and stronger and just as present and just as valid. And so sometimes you will hear people say, oh, you're reducing it. We also have various Jewish threads on a number of things, and we have a strong moral basis. And so I am here acknowledging that there are other positions and saying that the majority of the tradition has taken this position for real reasons. Okay, I'm acknowledging that there are those texts, and we are going down this road. So, Rav Emden.
All right. The questioner asks about an adulterous married woman who is pregnant is a good question. It appears to me to permit her to abort, and even in the case of a legitimate fetus, there is reason to be lenient if there is a great need, as long as the fetus has not begun to emerge, even if the mother's life is not in jeopardy, but only so as to save her from woe associated with it that would cause her great pain. Okay,
this is a big one. On the Jamboard. Get on the Jamboard. Whoever, if you haven't been, definitely be. Anarchy, chaos. What do you see? What do you notice? What do you wonder? So for some context, the reason it's relevant that it's an adulterous married woman. And then if you go to my we've got all of this in in my Sefaria. If you go to my profile on Sefaria, you can find this link to the source sheets, is the easiest way. So we're saving her from woe. And the reason it matters that she's adulterous is that a child born of an adulterous woman has a status of a mamzer. It's a sort of an exiled status in Jewish law. It's problematic. And so that is, it's a big deal. So we've got a case to abort for emotional pain. We will follow up with all the links. Pregnancies don't happen in a vacuum. We're considering context, even mental health, mental anguish. Leniency is a priority. It doesn't give specifications for what counts as woe. Isn't that interesting? Right? Emerges birth. Is literally like if the head is not out. Mental pain is valid reason to abort. Emotional state, pregnancies don't happen in a vacuum. Legitimate fetus means a fetus that is not born of an adulterous relationship and therefore wouldn't be subject to complicated stuff when they are born. You have permission to choose based on emotional distress. Okay. And I want you to point out one of my favorite things about this, that a lot of, you see all the time in in literature that I don't think necessarily always gets enough play. So he's talking about a case that someone else answered in a different situation. And so he's knocking it around. And he says, okay, so we've got this case of this adulterous married woman. And I think, yes, totally she can abort, right? And then what happens when, and then he doesn't just answer the question at hand, right? He's like, okay, well, in this case of the adulterous case, absolutely she can abort. But then he keeps talking. Think about this strategically. And even in the case of a legitimate fetus, there is reason to be lenient if there is a great need, as long as she's not in labor, as long, to save her from woe. What has he just done? He went and left the barn door open and walked away, right? He doesn't define what woe is. He's, he doubles down on centering the pregnant person, but he's he doesn't just go for the narrow case he was asked about. He's intentionally vague, right? He expands his answer, is vague, and kind of wanders, right? He just, so what does he do? He's basically like, you guys, abortion is permitted. Stop asking. Right? Yes, he was. This is Yavetz was very respected, right? But he makes a point of saying, you guys, it's fine. And so when people come to me, and I teach rabbis a lot, and they say, is it okay? Is it Jewish law says it's here's your permission, right? Do you need more permission? Here's your permission. Okay, let's go back to the other slides. Okay. And boom, boom. This is the backup okay, now, and then to make the case, there are a lot of dudes who, will go in a similar direction. You've got Rabbi Yehudah Waldenberg in 20th century Israel. Suffering and emotional pain in great measure are greater and more painful than physical pain, right? He's talking about giving permission to abort in a specific case around Tay-Sachs pregnancy, Tay-Sachs, but he's acknowledging that that emotional pain matters, and that is a legitimate criteria for pregnancy. Right? And you think about people being forced to stay pregnant because the state mandates it. Right. We've got Yehudah ibn Ayyash. Thank you, Rabbi Margot Hirsch-Robinson, for showing me this text. 18th century Algeria is these women are doing self-managed medication abortion. Checks his logic. Yes, that's permitted. Doesn't say you have to check with your husband, doesn't say you have to ask a rabbi on each and every case, says what they're doing is okay and walks away. It's presumably herbal, we don't know. Mental health risk matters from Mordechai Winkler. And all of these are very highly respected or Orthodox dudes, right? Aaron Lichtenstein talks about dignity and pain that should be factors, right? So people who need permission from Orthodox men for abortion access, our tradition has that. Okay, we've got our foundation Torah texts say that, and we have a really serious, strong tradition of people understanding that there are a lot of reasons why someone might terminate pregnancy. And there are a lot of people going, okay, it's permitted, stop asking me, basically. Okay, next. So then let's talk about our Jewish values in a broader way. Next. I'd like to bring Rabbi Becky Silverstein to teach his own Torah.
What happens if someone is ill and cannot fast on Yom Kippur? The Talmud invokes a verse from the biblical book of Proverbs, Lev Yodea Marat Nafsho, translated as the heart knows the bitterness of its soul, to teach that the sick person is actually the expert who should make this decision. The text of the Talmud even says that nobody can possess more expertise on such a question than the sick person themselves. In this way, Judaism's principle of Lev Yodea Marat Nafsho authorizes as experts both pregnant people who want to end a pregnancy and trans people seeking gender-affirming care or the right to live as their true selves. It demands that we honor the self-knowledge of those individuals.
Amen. Right. We have deep Jewish principles that say we already, like, you know yourself, your agency matters. Trans people's agency matters, pregnant people's agency matters, whether or not there is permission granted from someone else, right? Yes? Yes? Next. Okay. Our commandments, our mitzvot to set up a just society have always included a focus on those most impacted. For example, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. We see them again and again and again and again and again and again in our texts, right? The widow and the orphan and the stranger. And it's ancient intersectionality. How? What does that mean? What does it mean that our demanding care for the widow, orphan, and stranger is ancient intersectionality? What is that? For folks who are comfortable with the language of intersectionality, thoughts? All these groups are equal? Not quite. Okay, so intersectionality is a theory that was developed, the language was developed by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a Black legal theorist, basically, that talks about how at the intersection of two oppressions, something different happens. So if you are Black, there's racism. If you're a woman, there is sexism. And if you're a Black woman, what happens is the oppression that one experiences isn't like sexism plus racism. It's a new experience that is misogynoir is the language that a lot of people use, but is a different kind of an experience that is sexist racism or racist sexism, wherein something different happens when you have an intersection of two things. So, for example, many people on this call are Jewish women, and so you can think about the stereotypes of Jewish women and how they are unique to stereotypes of Jews globally. For example, that would be ancient intersectionality. Rabbi Rivera is hitting us up, and Kristen Booth, great. So oppression is even more potent, right? The needs of vulnerable and exploited groups intersect, right? So overlapping systems of discrimination. So if someone is, when we are talking about care in poverty, someone who is more vulnerable because of their gender and marital status in poverty, we know that someone who is more vulnerable in poverty because of their parental status and age, we know that somebody is going to have a different experience, a unique, more vulnerable experience in poverty because of their national status and their access to language and networks and whatever else, right? So the Torah knows this. The Torah knows that these people are going to have a different time than other Israelites who also may be struggling with poverty. And so we already know, and we were reminded again and again and again. And so we know now, next slide, that people who are harmed most by abortion bans are people who are already harmed most by systemic injustice in our country, right? Black, Indigenous, and people of color, right? BIPOC folks, young people, people with disabilities, disabled folks, immigrants, trans men, non-binary people in particular, people struggling to make ends meet, right? So we fight for abortion justice because we have an obligation to always have an eye on those who are harmed most. And to remember that harm is not flat and value neutral, right? We are always commanded to build a just society that is thoughtful about who is impacted and how they are impacted. Does that make sense? So we need to be, so our commandments for abortion justice work include being thoughtful and collaborative and in solidarity and partnership and letting those who are, and not letting, and understanding that those who are most impacted must lead, right? And following their leadership, and letting that be part of how we all get free. Okay, next slide. So now I'm gonna have a little Torah from Professor Michal Raucher that is going to be introduced by, oh no, I just lost your, I lost my.
It's me, Joni Hun.
Thank you. Joni, break it away.
Unless you support a person's right to bodily autonomy, then you are supporting a system wherein someone else determines what you or anyone else can do with their bodies. It does not matter whether that person is a lawmaker, a judge, a contemporary rabbi, or one from 2,000 years ago. It does not matter whether that person would permit most abortions or even require some. A religious argument based on Jewish law and rabbinic texts only goes so far. Unencumbered support for abortion justice may not be an argument rooted in Jewish law, but it is a Jewish argument and it's time to make it.
Professor Raucher is at Rutgers. She's incredible and brilliant and spends a lot of her time working at the intersection of Jews and abortion. So she spent some time thinking about this. And I am proud and grateful that our tradition supports abortion access and that understands that abortion justice is a Jewish value, right? That from a plain, simple reading of Torah and Talmud, you can see the free exercise and establishment clause violations of overturning Roe and limiting access to abortion, right? You can see it. You can see how we are permitted and sometimes required to have abortion access is a violation of free exercise. You can see how life begins at conception is a violation of the establishment clause. And even if we didn't have text to back us up, I would still be fighting for abortion justice. Okay? And at a certain point, we need to be able to say abortion for access for anyone who needs it, and that a paternalistic is your reason good enough attitude, like that's not Jewish, right? As Rabbi Silverstein made it very, very clear, and that our tradition can empower us to move forward and say, our commitment to building a more just society has to include empowering people, empowering those who are most impacted, and anybody who does not want to be pregnant is most impacted by these bans right now, right? And not being gatekeepers and not saying, I'm going to decide for you, if your reason is good enough, right? We need abortion access even for people who are not 10 years old. We need abortion access even for people who are not sexually assaulted. We need abortion access even for people whose life is not in danger, right? Anybody who does not want to be forced by the state to carry to term a birth, right? Whether it's devastating because it will force them to stay in poverty and abusive relationships, whether it's devastating medically, whether it is simply just not what they want and it's their body and they get to decide. We need to say that as Jews, we see that you're created in the divine image, your dignity matters, and we are here for you and we are going to fight for your rights. So I would like to invite us to revel in the extraordinary texts that we have and to be expansive in our thinking about what a Jewish ethic for abortion justice can and should be, and to bring this fight forward in all of the ways that can be, and fight for everybody's rights and everybody's access, and to understand how this fight is interlinked with the fight for transliberation, as Rabbi Silverstein noted. It's the fight against white supremacy, right? It's the fight against economic exploitations, all intertwined. And when we do this work, we are part of an important group project to create a more just society for everybody. So now to carry it forward, I'm going to pass the mic to my amazing colleague, Glenn Northern, who is the co-director of the Jews for Abortion Access work that we do here at NCJW. I'm delighted and honored to get to work with him every day. And he's going to talk about where we go out of the text and into real life.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Danya and Rabbi Becky. I feel incredibly inspired by all of that. So again, thank you. So the next piece is really a few slides on what it is that we can do. So this first slide is really sort of hit you with the gravity of this situation. All of those red states are the states in which there are bans or where basically abortion is in jeopardy. And you see the gray states with where there's actually access, and you can see there's vast deserts and challenges for folks to actually, get to a place where they can actually get an abortion. Next slide. So one of the beacons on this horizon, a sort of a brighter light in a sea of difficulty around this, is really medication abortion. Medication abortion is safe, it's effective, it works up to 10 weeks, you take 2 pills. And while it is actually being regulated by states, one of the things that we want folks to do at this moment is really have the federal government remove 2 of the remaining FDA restrictions. We've had over 20 years of research to show how effective and how safe this is, but because it actually is abortion, it's been subject to unnecessary restrictions. And so one of the things that we are asking for the administration to do is remove the few remaining restrictions that actually exist by the FDA, because they're essentially unnecessary. Next slide, please. NCJW is really pulling together the Jewish community around abortion access. We really want to build a movement a Jewish movement for abortion access, and we need your help. Next slide. Another critical way of helping in this moment is really with abortion funds. So as I said, people will need to travel to get abortions, people need to pay for abortions, and they need money. They simply need money. They need money for the travel, they need money for people will have to travel out of state, people will have to, leave their the existing children in childcare. We know that the majority of folks who who get abortions already have other children. And so we've created the Jewish Fund for Abortion Access, which will give money, next slide, to the National Abortion Federation, which creates has a hotline that hooks individuals up with a case manager that walks them through the state laws, gives them money when it's needed, money for the procedure itself, money for travel, and really can connect them to the resources that they need. Also give to your local abortion funds where you are in the country. Those are also very much in need. This is a both and situation. The Jewish Fund for Abortion Access allows us to give a collective gift as the Jewish community. And because they have the whole nation in perspective as they're thinking through this, they are able to dole out that money to individuals to get the care that they need. Next slide. So folks may have seen last week that the administration issued an executive order. Truthfully, that executive order was full of more bluster than substance. And so really what we are asking the administration to do is a whole lot more. And so we're going to drop into the chat a letter from the Jewish community to the administration. It has over 2,000 signatures thus far, and we're gaining more, to ask the administration to really take more action around this within the executive, within the functions that the executive office can actually do. Like they have already created an interagency task force, but there's a lot more they can do. They can help pass WIPA, the Women's Health Protection Act. They can nominate federal and general qualified federal judges. They can further expand the medication abortion access. And even by declaring a federal health emergency, there are other tools that are available to them. Next slide. And then also, because at this moment, we need to take our lead from those who are most affected, we are partnering with Abortion Access Front, which is also partnering with the Abortion Care Network, which is the independent clinics across the nation, to basically take our lead on what it is that they need at this moment in time. And so this is a training that we're co-sponsoring, that we're asking for folks to participate in, which will give you lots of information about the best ways to help save abortion at this moment in time. Again, taking our lead from what the clinics need and what advocates are actually saying on the ground in states. And that piece we will also drop into the chat. And then we're also going to follow up with that with our own folks next week to have a debrief and provide sort of next steps for our Jewish community around this. Next slide. I think the next slide is actually really similar. So the next slide really talks a little bit about some of the pieces that you'll actually see in the training, both about funding abortion, about how to take political action, about direct action, which as generally the reproductive health rights and justice community has done very little of, but is increasingly doing as things have become more dire. Thank you. There is a lot to do, and we are grateful for all of you being on the call today. I'm going to actually pass it back to Rabbi Danya to sort of truly close us out. But I just want to actually say it is a source of hope to see so many folks gathered together. Really, the energy that's here, present here, and in other situations that I've been in, it really is a source of great hope. And I believe that we can collectively change the culture and make it better for those who are seeking abortions.
Amen. Thank you all for being here. Abortion justice is a Jewish value. Reproductive freedom is a Jewish value. Fighting for everybody's safety and wholeness and autonomy and dignity is a Jewish value. And I'm so grateful for your coming, and to be continued. Please take action, show up. JewsForAbortionAccess.org there's a sign up to get involved, and we will keep sending out the next round of learnings, of actions, of the next steps, the next things to be doing. We are not going anywhere, and we have plenty more to do to fight for everybody's rights and safety. So please show up, and thank you for being here. And early Shabbat Shalom. Bye, everybody.